Chris, over 2 years. Well, first of all, good to see you. Long time.
Cheers.
Last time I saw you was at the Dauphiné on the fateful day. Um,
Yeah.
Over 2 years since you've been in this position, i.e., on the eve of a Grand Tour. How does it feel to be back?
Feels great. Feels great. Feels I've got that sort of nervous excitement of yeah. Great to have that feeling. I mean, almost like rewinding a few years and going back to sort of the unknown of not really knowing where I'm going to be, being on the start line of a Grand Tour, and yeah, quietly sort of optimistic, happy with how preparations have gone so far and in training. I mean, good to see my sort of old numbers at least heading back in the right direction. But yeah, hard to say exactly where I'm going to be once the race starts, but we'll find out pretty quickly.
You say that it's difficult to know where you are. Now, we're more and more accustomed to thinking, believing, maybe wrongly, that you guys always know exactly where you are and where everyone else is just by looking at numbers. Tell me about the unknowns
Yeah,
when you
I
go
mean,
into a race like this.
that's I think the simplistic version is to say, okay, you can do 7 watts a kilo for half an hour, therefore you're at this level, or you can do 6.7 watts a kilo for half an hour, you'll be at this level. But so I mean, the numbers I've seen in training have been really decent recently. But having said that, that's not after 4 hours of racing at the end of a stage, or having raced for the previous 3 days leading up to that point. So it's, I mean, you can take a lot from your data in training, and that certainly helps, but you don't know where everyone else is at, and you don't know how you're going to cope with the race speed, especially when you haven't been racing a lot in a year where there's been lockdowns and race cancellations. And so from that side, there are a lot of unknowns. I mean, I don't know how I'm going to cope in the race and that side of things, but certainly from just a pure numbers point of view, I'm much happier now than I was, say, before the Tour de France with how things were looking.
You say you're close or getting closer to where your numbers should be or where they have been in the past. How close are you, Chris, would you say, if you could quantify it?
Well, to be honest, I can't really quantify that exactly. I mean, I haven't picked them apart in that sense. I've just been doing sort of the most I can, and but yeah, I'm sort of very much in the same ballpark as where I've been previously.
And well, you did your press conference earlier with Richard Carapaz. It seemed fairly clear there that he's the team leader. Is that correct? And are you setting out knowing already that you're going to have a support role, or is it very much options open, see how you go the first couple of days?
Yeah, very much for me. I think options are open in the first few days. Just see how I get along, and where I fit in, I guess, in the hierarchy of the team. And in that sense, I'll know what my role looks like for the next few weeks.
Do you wish it was a slightly gentler first week? Would that have helped you? Because it's so unusual. It's mountain stages almost every day for a week.
It's typical Vuelta. No, I mean, it is what it is, and I mean, it's the same for everyone. I ideally probably would have liked to have raced a bit more before coming into the Vuelta, but yeah, I mean, I think everyone's in the same boat, unless you were doing Flanders yesterday and the rest of the classics. Other people wouldn't have necessarily done much more racing. I guess there are the guys who've done the Tour de France, and I think certainly in the races post-Tour and at Worlds, we could see the guys who had done the Tour seem to be in a different league compared to everyone else. So it will be interesting here to see exactly where everyone pulls up, how everyone pulls up from recovering from the Tour, and the guys who didn't do the Tour, how their preparations have gone. It's going to be a really sort of, I think, a really mixed level of riders coming into this Vuelta.
I'm just going to prod you again about the Tour de France, Chris. Do you feel differently now to when you felt when you weren't selected for the tour about the wisdom of that decision? Do you now, with hindsight, feel that actually it was the right decision, or very much the right decision? How do you feel about it now today?
I mean, it's not really my place to question that decision. I mean, I know that at the time, I certainly wasn't as ready as I am now to be going into a Grand Tour. So in that sense, it was definitely a blessing for me to have more time and to really get myself into better shape, and hopefully that will pay off once the Grand Tour starts.
Just in terms of sort of functionality, Chris, of the leg post-injury, is there any legacy whatsoever of the injuries? Anything you feel on the bike, or nothing of that sort?
No. So on the bike, I mean, I don't have any kind of pain or any lingering issues in that sense. I think the biggest challenge for me recently has been just trying to regain that top end power, especially on that side that was injured. I mean, I have to remember that leg was straight, for sort of locked straight, not even able to bend it for the best part of 6 weeks. And I think naturally, I mean, I think I'd lose a lot of my quad through that injury. And a lot of my training recently has actually been in the gym, been doing big focus on off-bike work recently, trying to regain that muscle strength. And then obviously using training to try and transfer that onto the bike, which I believe has gone really well recently.
And one thing that's happened since the injury in the Dauphiné last year, well, you've had another birthday, you're 35 now. I'm just wondering how you think about longevity. There are lots of different schools of thought about, I mean, I think the team that you're joining next year, Israel Startup Nation, they sort of emphasize the fact that you didn't ride that much, you didn't race that much when you were younger, and therefore you might go on for longer. I mean, also looking at how young the riders are who are thriving at the moment in the Giro and so on and so forth. Do you feel 35? Do you feel older than 35, or do you feel as though you've got a good few years still ahead of you?
It's funny because obviously where the accident came in my career, I mean, I think I was basically going from Grand Tour to Grand Tour pretty much at that point. And I think it came at a point where it actually was almost could be seen in some ways as quite a welcome break in some respects. I mean, 6 months out of it, 6 months out of the whole racing and training cycle, in a way has left me, I think, a lot fresher. I've come in with a whole new motivation. I'm not just doing the same old year in, year out anymore. I mean, it almost feels as if I've gone back to the beginning of my career again, and I've got to try and sort of get to the point where I'm able to win Grand Tours again. So in that sense, I almost feel rejuvenated. I feel a lot, refreshed in a sense. I'm a huge believer that age is very much a state of mind. I think a lot of guys who start racing in their early teens and they're just full gas through their 20s, obviously reach 30 and they're ready to hang up. A lot of them hang it up in their early 30s. But I felt if I only really got into the sport my early 20s, only really found my potential towards my late 20s. So I'd like to think I've still got a good few more years left in me, and mentally I'm up for basically still making all those little sacrifices and commitments and everything along the way to still tackle Grand Tours. So that's very much where my head is at. And I mean, it's going to be interesting to see because, as you said, there's just this young pool of guys who have just come into the sport now, and they've been incredible sort of in their early 20s, which is just, I mean, Pogacar, Bernal. A
few of them, Chris, I've noticed, I don't know if you've noticed, but a few of them have started mentioning you as one of their role models, that they grew up watching you. I mean, how Almeida, I think, said it yesterday at the Giro. I mean, how does that make you feel?
Oh, did you say Almeida said that?
Almeida said it yesterday that I think, well, he's been saying at the Giro that, you know, he grew up watching you and
Oh,
you were
okay.
his hero.
Interesting. I hadn't picked up on that, but yeah, it is interesting to hear people say that, and it almost does sort of give me a bit of a reality check of, I guess, the different generations. But yeah, hopefully this isn't the end of my sort of time at the top of Grand Tour racing, and I'm very much sort of mentally preparing to be back there, especially once we get into next season.
And do you increasingly, talking of role models, do you find yourself looking at guys in other sports maybe or in cycling who have sustained, you know, very high level until, you know, 40? I think of someone like Tom Brady, the you know, the quarterback in American football, who's over 40. I mean, are they kind of your role models now?
It's funny. I haven't really looked much outside of our sport. But I mean, it's just it is certainly interesting to note the achievements of guys like Valverde. I mean, he's touching on 40 and still at the very pointy end of the race. So I mean, it's definitely motivating to see that it's still possible. I think it's very much a sort of a mental decision. If you're still prepared to make all those sacrifices and you're still prepared to spend the time on the road and away from family and everything else, I think that's generally what catches up to people faster than the actual physical attributes becoming less.
So last thing, Chris, what would constitute a good Vuelta for Chris Froome, and what would be a good Vuelta for Ineos Grenadiers?
I mean, ideally for Ineos, we win the Vuelta with Richard Carapaz. I think he's definitely got a good shot at it. For me personally, I'd love to be there in the mountains when it gets selective, but I've really got no idea where I stand at the moment. So I think I'll find out pretty quickly in the first few days, and whatever the case is, I'd hope to build through the race. And as I get more racing in the legs, I'd like to come out of this Grand Tour certainly not feeling as if I've got any deficits going into next year.